What if I told you that China is turning its largest desert into a forest? Not just any forest, but the largest artificial forest in human history. In the 1970s, China faced a massive environmental crisis. Deserts were expanding at an alarming rate, swallowing up usable land and threatening communities. Sandstorms would regularly blast through cities, turning skies orange and making life unbearable for millions. The situation was so dire that some areas were losing thousands of hectares of productive land every year. How many mega projects does China have? Dozens? Hundreds? Thousands? Yeah, this country loves to amaze the world with the results of its work, all wrapped up in concrete, steel, aluminum, or any other shell. But what really stands out is how China works with deserts. This can definitely be called one huge mega project. Millions of tons of sand dug up to turn a lifeless area into something green, and China doesn't care which desert it's transforming, whether it's the dangerous GOI or the shifting tackle. China knows how to handle any land full of sand. Any methods on the table. Sometimes it's hands-on work, sometimes more advanced solutions come into play. Overall, China knows how to turn even the most barren land into something else. We're going to tell you exactly how they do it. Great Green Wall. Well, let's start by heading to the Goi Desert, the sixth largest in the world after the cold wastelands of Antarctica and the Arctic, the Sahara, the deserts of Australia, and the barren lands of the Arabian Peninsula. The Goi is located in northern China, which shares it with Mongolia, but it was the Chinese government that decided to implement a large-scale land reclamation project here to create what's called the Great Green Wall. From the name, you can tell the ambitions of this program are just as big as those of the other famous Great Wall. And you know, it's exactly like that. Unlike the warm and green southern part of China, the desert-like north is covered by forests in only 5% of its area, and this project was meant to increase that depressing figure by 3 times. The thing is, the Goi Desert is gradually expanding. The intensity of sandstorms is also growing to the point where they even reach neighboring Japan, North Korea, and South Korea. And in order to prevent people from being buried by sand, the government started a forest planting program called the 3 North Shelter Forest Program. Yep, the Great Green Wall is also called that because it stretches across the north, northeast, and northwest of the country. Try to imagine the scale of this project for a second. The country's authorities came up with the project several decades ago back in 1978, and they plan to finish it in 2050. The project has been advancing very successfully, with the country's residents putting all their efforts into it. By 2009, the trees covered more than 193,000 square miles, creating the world's largest artificial forest. According to a 2020 report, the tree planting programs led to a significant absorption of carbon dioxide and even helped mitigate climate change. As a result, the Goi, which was expanding by 3,800 square miles each year in the 1980s, started shrinking in 2022 by more than 770 square miles each year. Can you imagine how successful China's been in this project? They literally made the desert move in the opposite direction. By the way, this major change wasn't achieved only thanks to the specialists working on China's program. Regular Chinese people were also busy planting trees in the desert. This woman, Yin Yuzhen, made Goi green for 40 years, planting nearly 74,000 acres of land with her husband. With people like that, it feels like China's untouchable. So in 2020, they figured out the project works. What will they do next all the way until 2050? Development, development, and more development. China is planning to plant about 137,000 square miles of forest, which will form a wall around 3,000 miles long and about 900 m wide. We'll see how all this turns out in the future, but even now, China has something to be proud of. The desert has started shrinking, and the number of sandstorms has gone down too. Green taken belt. But the Goi is far from being the only desert in China. This is the Taken, which people call the Sea of Death. Although it's smaller than the Goi, just 130,000 square miles compared to 520,000 square miles, the Taken is considered the second largest desert, with shifting sand dunes covering 85.5% of its area. The natural conditions in this place are extremely harsh. The sand dunes are constantly shifting due to powerful winds, and they're always destroying the meadows and residential areas. The worst part is that Taken, like the GOI, is also gradually expanding, so the situation looks pretty bleak. The desert will keep swallowing up more and more land. However, you didn't think that China's fans of megaprojects and greenery would just ignore Taken, did you? Once again, the Great Green Wall comes to the rescue. The project's name is actually different now, it's Green Belt, but the idea is still the same, to limit the desert, stop it from spreading. So, Taken has basically been locked in. The desert's been completely surrounded by a 1,890 m green belt. This massive initiative took 40 years, during which the first 1,715 miles of the green belt were completed. The last 177 miles, started in 2022, required an army of 600,000 people to plant desert-resistant species, desert poplar, red willow, and Saxel trees. The green belt not only prevents the desert from spreading, it also boosts the region's economic growth. Some planted species, like medicinal desert hin, can bring financial benefits here. Devouring the lake. But let's not rush to praise China. Everyone has their flaws, and China has a really big one. We'll talk about that, of course, but a bit later. For now, let's talk about one of the most telling examples of how a country literally destroys itself for the sake of industrial development. Decades of mass urbanization in China have led to a huge demand for sand to make glass, concrete, and other materials used in construction. So the question came up, why not just take sand from the deserts to meet these needs? Sounds like a great idea, but the most sought-after material actually comes from rivers and lakes, not from barren deserts. Look, this is China's largest freshwater lake, Payang Lake. Despite its proud title, they've started digging sand right out of it. These are the ships that made it happen. They just sail to the right spot and then suck the sand right off the bottom. As a result, the ongoing sand extraction caused the lake's water level to drop, which made things worse for local farming, and the local fauna probably didn't thank anyone for the reduced water level. Fish and birds lost a big part of their habitat. The lake is also a key flood runoff area for the Yangtze River, which overflows its banks in the summer and can cause huge damage to crops and property. Even though the government took steps to limit sand extraction, these efforts didn't amount to anything. In the end, the resources of this once vibrant and lively lake were simply drained. Still, desert projects are great for saving animals, agriculture, and all the other things that suffer from the encroaching sand. The highway. By the way, the Chinese are trying to stop the spread of deserts not just by planting trees. China isn't shy about building roads there. Why not? If most of the country's territory will still be taken up by lifeless land for a long time, after all, it takes a long time to see results from greening projects. And so here we are again, back in the Taken Maken. As we've already mentioned, it's an impossible and brutal desert. But even here, you need to get around somehow, even though it's clear that the area is completely uninhabited. That's why a decision was made to build a road here, and not just one, but three, the main one and two additional ones. The construction of the main London Highway started back in 1993. The initial reason wasn't to create convenient infrastructure for locals, but to expand the oil industry, which required quick deliveries through the desert. However, just 2 years later, the highway was open to anyone who wanted to use it. And when it became clear that one highway wasn't enough, 2 more were built. The 97 miles Taki was opened 7 years later, and 5 years after that, the A, which stretched for 263 miles. Of course, on such a tricky piece of land, there were bound to be problems. Even though a huge amount of heavy machinery worked hard to clear the sand from the roads, it still ended up on the highway and made it hard for vehicles to pass. To solve this, bushes and other plants were planted along the road, their roots holding the sand in place. The Chinese also built a massive irrigation system to pump water for the vegetation along the highway. Also, every 2.5 miles along the road, they put up a shed for maintenance to keep the irrigation going for these roadside bushes and protect the road from the sand. It might sound weird for such a dead place, but the ecology here is actually just fine. The Taken Desert Highway became the first carbon-zero highway in China. Every one of the 109 irrigation wells along the highway runs on clean energy. The project includes 86 solar power plants, which have already generated over 5 million kilowatt-hours of green electricity. It's important to note that this project not only helps protect the environment but also reduces diesel fuel consumption by 1,000 tons per year and cuts CO2 emissions by 3,410 tons. Overall, China's actively promoting carbon neutrality, strengthening its role as one of the leaders in renewable energy.